My name is Georgina Mann. I completed a PhD and I started in 2014. I decided that I was interested in psychology out of high school. It was something that really interested me in a general sense to learn more about people. But it wasn't until I began my uni degree that I really started focusing in on psychology. I wanted to be able to help people, and throughout my studies I became more and more aware that you were able to do this not only through clinical work but through research to develop paradigms and further understanding about people that could be applied in a general sense to help people fairly widely. I initially wanted to do clinical psychology and become a clinician, but once I did my honours degree, I realised that my favourite thing about psychology was research. I think there's something really special about having your research findings and having your data in front of you and being the only person in the world that knows what you know at that time. And I think that's what makes research so special. And as a result of that, in my honours degree, I decided that that's what I wanted to do. And so I decided to apply for a PhD. I had the same PhD supervisor as the supervisor I had in honours. So in my honours degree, I think as most people find, it was very, very stressful. And my supervisor was incredibly supportive and incredibly encouraging, but also was able to explain things in a way that really made sense to me. And so when I started my PhD research, obviously it was a topic that I was interested in. I had learnt that through my honours, but I think it's really important to pick a supervisor who is able to teach you in a way that you find useful and who's also able to support you on a human level, because it is a difficult course, it can be stressful, and it's important to be able to have those communications with your supervisor. The biggest challenge of the PhD, I think, is just the amount of time you spend not really knowing when it's going to end. I think when you start, you have an idea about what your pathway is going to be, and I think it's important to recognise that that might not be the exact pathway that your research follows. My supervisor once described it to me as rowing out into the ocean, and at some stage you can't see the shore you came from and you can't see where you're going either. So you have to really like paddling. And I think that's a pretty good analogy for the PhD, simply because there are often a couple of years in the middle where you can't really see where you came from and you can't see where you're going either. And that's quite a significant challenge, I think, for a lot of people. The research that I do now isn't directly based on my PhD, and so I've really been able to reflect on the skills that I learnt. So I think learning statistical methods, I think learning programming languages, and I think learning how to critically evaluate the literature is the most important part of doing a PhD. And they're skills that are really easily transferred to other areas. So you can learn different topics, you can apply those skills to different areas. So I think those are the things that were most valuable. If I had my time again, I think I would have limited the number of studies that I was going to do for my PhD. I think when you're in the middle of it, if you have an unanswered question, it's really easy to just put something together to try and answer that question. And I think if I was to do my PhD again, I would sit down a lot earlier and decide that I was happy with not knowing the answer and stopping writing more chapters. At times, poorly, but I think the most important thing is having a life outside of the PhD. It's not like a job where you can put it away at 5 o'clock and go home. The PhD is a big cognitive load as well, and you often take it with you wherever you go. So I think it's really important to have good boundaries between your PhD and your home life to give you some space from it when you're at home. It's important to make sure you have a good social support system who can be there for you when you're needing some reprieve. And it's also important to be close to your fellow students so that you can talk to them about the things that you're experiencing, because a lot of the more challenging components of the PhD are universal experiences that your peers will be able to support you through. Yes, the lead up to my submission was very exciting. I'd been doing the PhD for a long time, and I think a lot of people will tell you that when you're wrapping up your PhD, you are very much done with it and you don't want to look at it anymore. So in the couple of weeks prior to my submission, I was primarily working on minor edits, sort of grammatical edits rather than larger sort of structural changes. This was in the beginning of 2020 as well. So this was when COVID was first happening. My plan was to walk up to the GRS and submit the thesis in person, but unfortunately that couldn't happen due to the COVID restrictions. But I think the most important thing is having something to do after the PhD is finished. The submission is a big, exciting time, and it's also a relief, but it can be quite sad afterwards because you've handed off your baby that you've spent a number of years working on, and unless you have something lined up afterwards, whether that be work or a holiday, it can feel like you don't have that much purpose anymore, and it takes a bit of time to adjust to that. There will be times when you wonder why you chose the topic that you chose. You wonder why you're doing a PhD. It can be really difficult and challenging. I think it's important to remember that while it's important to pick a topic you love at the beginning, the most important thing is being willing to push through the times that are really challenging and being open with your supervisors about the supports you need to get through those times. You could be writing a PhD about the most interesting topic in the world, and there'll be times where you think that it's the most boring thing you've ever heard in your life and you're really sick of it. So being able to have a good relationship with your supervisor and being prepared to slog through some of those less interesting components and the more difficult components of doing a PhD is something that I think is good to be prepared for. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Yeah, absolutely. It was some of the best years of my life. As much as it was really challenging, and at times I didn't know if I was going to make it through the PhD and finish the bloody thing, I think it's an incredible experience. It's taught me so many skills that I now use almost daily in my research role that I have now. I've also made a large number of friends who have had very similar experiences of research and who are doing amazing things all around the world now, and I get to see what's going on in their lives. I would do it again in a heartbeat, and I think that the second time round I'd be a bit wiser about what I was doing, but I think it's an incredible thing to do. In 5 years' time, I see myself still doing research. So I've been really lucky to be able to secure a research role out of my PhD, which has meant I've been able to continue practicing those skills, such as statistics and study design that I was able to develop in my PhD. And I'm hoping in the next 5 years I'll be able to continue research, but developing more and more sort of authority and control over the research programs that happen as I progress sort of up the career ladder, I guess.